This is a live feed of what's going on in Israel right now. It is 7:23 in the evening in Israel right now, in the Levant. And I'm going to try this live feed again. Apparently, I wasn't the only one having problems with the YouTube live streaming concerning the war. I've had problems with the connection before, but I never had my live stream get cut off 4 times. I mean, I'm connected by Ethernet. I have pretty good speed. It's not the greatest, but good enough. So it makes me wonder if YouTube was indeed throttling the live feed because we were discussing the war in Israel. But we are in a day and age where I suppose it was always the case. You can't trust anymore the main news channels, or at least you have to listen to them suspiciously. And the only way you can get news that you can trust is from people that you think you can trust, who are on the ground or know what's going on. Preferably a Christian, a Bible believer, that is. If you can hear me, let me know. I think the live is going well. What you're seeing on your screen right now, as I said, is a live feed of Israel. I don't know who's setting this up, but it's pretty interesting. I was reading my Bible this morning, reading in the prophet Amos. I just finished it, and reading the judgments there on Israel, and I was running the live feed. I don't usually do this, but I thought it was, how interesting would that be to, I'm reading the Bible, and it's alive right before my eyes. Now, we know the context of the main application of the prophetic verses are yet to come. They are after the rapture of the church, during the sorrows and the tribulation. But there is, the apostles themselves, Paul himself makes application of the prophetic writings to the church age. So there are the prophetic writings are sort of like, in the church age, a backdrop framework that still has an effect on what's going on. I've been following Amir Sarfati on Instagram. Some of you have joined his Instagram account after I mentioned him. So we'll see. I'm praying that the Lord gives me an opportunity to get on Theovox again to discuss this thing. It's a big French media here in Quebec. A lot of Christians and non-Christians listen to it. I'd love to be able to discuss these things from a biblical point of view. As you may know, I'm Lebanese. My grandparents were Greek Palestinians. There were 1948 refugees of the war, Israel's War of Independence. And they fled and ended up in Beirut, and that's how my mom and siblings were born in Beirut. My grandmother was born in Bethlehem. And of course, any of you that read the Bible, Israel has a special place in your heart when you're a Bible believer. Now, that doesn't mean that we are not sad over other peoples. I mean, this is terrible for all the innocents. You feel bad for all the innocents. I'm praying, and you are praying, for the salvation of Jews and Arabs, both Jews and Muslims. They both need the Lord Jesus Christ. What you're seeing there is the fruit of the rejection of the Son of God. He's the Prince of Peace, and when he comes, he's going to establish peace in the land. What I'd like to do now is to, I'm not sure if it got through the live feed last time, but I'll give you a little bit of background for the Gaza. Let me put that up here. No, I don't want those ads. Let me pass that over here to your screen. This is the kind of modern map of Israel, quote unquote. All right. Everything within that black line, so everything that's orange is Israel, but also the gray. If you'll notice, the gray part of your map is outlined with a dotted line, both what is called the West Bank, which is west of the bank of the Jordan River. That's literally why that's called that. And then Gaza over here on the border of Egypt and Israel. Now, those are part of Israel proper. They are not independent states. They never were meant to be independent states. This is a modern misconception. The way these were created, I'll let you know. Actually, I'm going to play a video I've got a full video on this issue, and I encourage you to watch it. And I do think that that video is being shadow banned by YouTube, and even when I put it on Facebook. I'm gonna play it for you now. This is something I recorded in February 2020, and this is the historical. We're gonna starting from the 1948 Israel War. This is how the West Bank, which is actually known as the Jews call it Judea and Samaria, which is what you read about in your Bible. But this is how the West Bank and Gaza were created. They're artificial creations. In fact, they are remnants of holdouts of the 1948 Israel War. That's what they are. So let me show you how this happened. I'm going to play the video for you. This is what the video is like. You can go see it yourself on my channel, Council and Might. And here we go. The Gaza Strip and the West Bank being here, west of the Jordan River, and the Gaza Strip being here, got created. After the cessation of hostilities in that war, Jordan controlled the West Bank, Egypt controlled the Gaza Strip. What you want to keep in mind is that both sides declared that the boundary was not an international border. The southern border with Egypt down there continued to be the one that had been drawn by the Ottoman Empire in 1906. Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip or Egypt were issued all Palestine passports. Egypt did not offer them citizenship, and no one back then was calling for a Palestinian state. The Jericho Conference was held in December 48 to decide the future of the portion of Palestine that was held by Jordan at the end of the 48 war, west of the Jordan River over here. Pro-Jordanian personalities called for the annexation of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, to Jordan rather than for a Palestinian state. The Transjordanian government gradually assumed the civil functions of the West Bank, paying the salaries of civil servants and absorbing local governors into what was henceforth the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And in 49, the Jordanian nationality law was amended to grant every Palestinian Jordanian citizenship, and Jordan annexed the West Bank in 51. Transjordan never gave Palestinians their own state. All right, so I don't know if you caught that. And that's why if I go back to the map that you'd be more familiar with in the modern day, this so the West Bank, when the 1948 war happened, Jordan attacked Israel, Syria and Lebanon attacked Israel, and Egypt attacked Israel. By the time the war stopped and Israel had won, this part of Israel was being controlled by the Jordanian army. And this part of Israel down here, Gaza, was being controlled by the Egyptian army. And that's it. Those are areas of holdout. Those people here were supposed to go back to Transjordan, which anyway, the Jews should have been allowed to live in. We already have a two-state solution, friends. The two-state solution was implemented from between 1921 and 1922. Jordan is the second state. We have a two-state solution. But people who are ignorant of history or want to ignore history won't talk about that. They were supposed to go back to Jordan, and these guys here were supposed to go back to Egypt. These guys are Egyptians, and these guys are Jordanians. Just look at the map. Look at the flag of Egypt and Jordan. They're similar. But Jordan wouldn't let them go back because they have a piece of Israel now. Egypt wouldn't let those guys come back because they have a piece of Israel now. And then you can claim like those are victims who are entrenched by the massive Israeli army, and they are held prisoners within their own land, which that is not the case at all. It's a complete lie. Now I'm going to give you an update about the situation. This is a breakdown about this is a breakdown of what has happened so far, but from a source that I trust more than others, because you must have heard so many different things already. I can't tell if this is lagging or not. So before I read it, just let me know, is it lagging? Because if it's lagging, I called the internet company. I'm probably going to change internet company and try to set up something faster here. But if it's lagging, I'll record the video and I'll publish it rather than doing this live. It's just more fun to do it live sometimes. But I see that there's a few of you there that are listening online. Could you let me know, is it lagging or is this coming in clearly through? Is the image and the audio lagging, or am I coming through well, guys? Because if, as I said, some of you just signed on now too. If it's lagging, I'll just record the video and I'll publish it. It should be up within an hour. I'll be right back. Oh, all right. So I just got your comments that it's not lagging. It's lagging on mine. So here we go. Where is he live other than YT? I'm just on live on YouTube. The platform was too expensive to broadcast to different platforms at the same time. We used to do that during COVID at church. But you can go on Facebook. There's a Council and Might group on Facebook, or you can check out too, Hope Baptist Church of Montreal on Facebook. There's been a lot. You've heard a lot probably from different sources, different numbers, different resumes of what actually happened. There's sites that I used to follow. DEPCA is one of them. It was more hawkish. That shut down with the death of its founder. But the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies those are analyses that are written by an Israeli think tank. A lot of those guys are former high-ranking IDF officers. So I'm not telling you that you have to trust everything they say. I definitely don't. Sometimes those reports are part of propaganda and intelligence work, which is normal to a certain point. But I'm going to give you the Israeli think tank's kind of resume of what's been going on. Okay. October 7th, 8th. Here's the resume as of October Sunday. And the Hamas offensive began shortly before 6:29 on October 7th, 2023. Now, this is Again, you're not going to get this everywhere on the internet. By 10 o'clock, IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, IDF radars had detected approximately 2,200 rocket launches at dozens of Israeli cities, towns, and villages between Gaza and the Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Beersheba line. During the day, Hamas and the other Palestinian militias, that would be the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, our jihad. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad is they're just concerned with military operations, and they are actually more intransigent than Hamas is. Hamas actually has to rein in sometimes the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So during the day, Hamas and the other Palestinian militias fired many hundreds more. The exact number has not yet been reported. The firing was conducted in salvos with multiple launchers in an attempt to penetrate the Iron Dome defense system. Many rockets landed in open areas, but even assuming a 95% success rate, which is the highest Iron Dome has ever achieved, that still means dozens of rockets that managed to hit inside Israeli cities, towns, and villages. The number of fatalities and wounded is not very high relative to the size of the bombardment, solely because of Iron Dome and the early warning system that enabled most Israeli civilians to reach bomb shelters in time. But what they did this time, it wasn't just a question of overloading the Iron Dome system. They shot a lot of what one expert called tin can, garbage can missiles. You need electric current to kind of set them off, and then you send them in a direct line, and they follow wherever they might fall. They're not too expensive. It's the Palestinian Islamic Jihad fabricates its own, and the idea there is that you can overwhelm the Iron Dome system with cheaper missiles, and hopefully some of the more expensive ones and powerful ones can land in strategic places. But the better idea there, what they had was a cover for the infiltration of terrorists, about 1,000 of them, into Israel proper territory. Israel, of course, why is Israel getting attacked? There's a natural hatred for the Jewish people because they're the people of God. Satan knows that. I'm talking nationally. Of course, individuals who reject Jesus Christ go to hell, sadly. It's the old hatred. God calls it in the book of Ezekiel the old hatred. It's the hatred between the half-brother. Ishmael hates Isaac because Isaac is blessed and Ishmael isn't. And really, that depends on their free will. They are the promised seed nationally, again, not individually. So the causes are spiritual. It's the same reason why Cain hated Abel and wanted to slay Abel. The firing was conducted, simultaneously with the beginning of the rocket bombardment. Hamas troops began crossing the border into Israel at sundry locations. The majority had approached the border in tunnels, climbed out just before the underground wall built by Israel, and then, using explosives, broke through the above-ground obstacle of a steel rod fence and advanced into Israel. Observation cameras monitoring the fence were shot up with small arms and RPG rockets, rocket-propelled grenades. One group attacked and captured the civilian crossing into Israel at Eres, where 20,000 Palestinian civilians cross daily into Israel to work and where hundreds of trucks transit with goods. Let me go back to the map. Do I still have the map? Somehow I lost the map. Let me pull back the map again. So what you have there is those remnants of the Egyptians from the war, 1948 war, they live here, in this area there. And then Israel allows them to cross at certain points, monitored points, to cross out of Gaza and into Jewish territory, I should say, and then work there, and then they go back to their home after that in Gaza. This is what they allow them to do, but it's controlled at specific entry points. The reason why it's controlled, by the way, if you ever doubted, when Israel was building the wall, they were severely condemned. But now you can see why. Imagine what would have happened to Israel had there not been a wall. Imagine had there not been a wall. 1,000 people broke through, and they're claiming that they're holding 180 hostages, abducted hostages now. They have killed so far, the number of dead Jews is over 1,000. It's about 1,000. Imagine if there had been no wall. And by the way, if you're an American, think about that. What has happened in Israel can easily happen in America. 2001 is not just in the distant past any more than 1973 in the Yom Kippur War, and the surprise attack then was in the distant past for Israel. It was Israel's mistake to think that was in the distant past. I hope you don't do the same mistake, America. Walls and protection are normal. Monitored access is normal. And all those people who are yelling inclusivity, let's build bridges and break down barriers, were the same people who divided up the planet and sometimes divided up their own family between vaccinated and unvaccinated and built walls of separation literally between us for a disease that, yes, was a disease, but whose mortality rate did not at all justify the kind of drastic measures that were taken. The solution was worse than the problem. There's the Google Earth view of it. And that delineated line over here, that's where the Egyptians held, the Jordanians, held after the 1948 war. West of the Jordan, there's the Gaza Strip. So a lot of 20,000 Palestinians daily come out of here, work in Israel, and then they go back. The attack came from here, which surprised Israel. A small group crossed the border using paragliders. Basically parachutes with propeller engines. You may have seen the videos of that. And a final group attacked from the sea, landing on an Israeli beach. Of that group, only a few made it through. The Israeli Navy actually took out most of them. Altogether, within the first couple of hours, more than 1,000 Hamas troops crossed the border into Israel in approximately 15 to 30 locations. Different sources have given different numbers, but for now we can't be sure what it was. We do know it's between 15 and 30. And then they fanned out in groups to attack Israeli civilians in military positions. They entered 2 Israeli towns and 12 villages at least, driving through the streets, shooting at passerby, and breaking into houses to kill the residents. In 3 locations, they captured buildings and held the occupants as hostages. The biggest such case included 50 people of all ages in a kibbutz known as Be'eri, and they herded them all into a communal dining room. One group reached a large nature party. Now that's kind of this is the part that really irks me. They reached a large nature party, and it's being described as a rave party outdoors. And there was 3,000 young Israelis partying there, including some visitors from Europe, mostly in their 20s, who had gathered there to dance. They attacked them with grenades and assault rifles, then chased the fleeing group, hunting down people who had sought to hide in the low brush. There's videos of this. As they're running away, they're shooting them in the field with machine guns as they're scattering. Indiscriminately, just shooting into the people. Group of 3,000 people. This is probably the location where the largest number of casualties was inflicted. The IDF and police units reaching this area have spent the past 2 days fighting off remaining teams of terrorists and collecting survivors and bodies. I'll get into the politics. I see the question. I'll get into politics in a second. That's a good question. What in the world? Look, especially the young Jewish people. Young people, childhood and youth are vanity, Solomon says. They are taken with their prosperity. They really are prosperous in Israel. That's the blessing of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they care nothing for God. They regard not the operation of his hands, the Bible says. They put away the evil day. And it's a party life. The rate of sodomy and fornication is very high in Israel, including in the IDF. By the way, same thing in Muslim countries, but it's not spoken of. It's hid before you get too high and mighty against the Jews. But what are you doing partying outside the Gaza Strip? What in the world? This is the equivalent. You have a 3,000 person young people party almost right outside the fence. That's like setting up a party within 10 yards of the gate of hell. And because a lot of them are of a liberal mindset. They think that, that they're misunderstood. Gaza is misunderstood. The Palestinians are misunderstood. There's a woman that's been abducted who's part of an organization called Women Making Peace. And she's a liberal who basically, says, let's make peace with the Palestinians and they're misunderstood and Israel is oppressing the Palestinians. She's one of the abducted now. What are you doing that outside their home? While I'm talking that, I'm going to show you a live feed of Gaza right now. If I can find it, I'll play the live feed in the background while I'm talking to you about that. It's an interesting site. I was reading my Bible and watching that this morning.
Eve Online on Mac immerses you in a universe with thousands.
This is a live feed right now. This is live right now, guys. It's 7:48 p.m., almost 8 p.m. over in the Levant. So what are you doing look, to give you an idea, you're not only is it foolish to be that close to Gaza and partying. I feel bad for those young people. I really do. But let this be a lesson to other young people. Remember, I think was it in Britain or a Selena Gomez concert, one of those concerts where Muslim terrorists walked in and just shot into the young people. In the pathway of righteousness, there is no death, the book of Solomon says. The book of Proverbs says. To give you an idea of how radical Hamas is about this kind of stuff. A few years back, there was a nominal Christian wedding taking place in Gaza. Those are Palestinians, quote unquote. Okay, Arabs, not Jews. They're in Gaza. It was a nominal Christian wedding, and they had music playing. Members of Hamas, or was it the Islamic Jihad, walked into the wedding and shot the people because they were playing music at the wedding. Because music is haram. They shot the people, killed them because they're playing music. Their own people, their own Palestinian people. Of course, they're Christians, so that's considered halal, which means legal to kill. Now you, as a Jew, dressed half-naked Jew, are outside their fence in a 3,000 people rave party. Later on, now I'm going to read it in a second. One of the terrorists who was captured basically told them that the party was a bonus for them. It was an unexpected bonus for them. It's like founding a bounty right outside the gate. One large and a few small IDF bases along the border were also attacked in the first rush, pinning down the outnumbered troops at those locations to fight for survival rather than assist the civilians. That's one of the things that compounded the slowness of the response. The first responders in the civilian residential areas were local response teams of IDF reservists living in the villages, usually 10 to 20 per village. They grabbed their weapons and ran out to face the attackers together with a few on-duty policemen in the towns. Here and there, Israelis with private weapons, basically pistols, also attempted to face the Hamas teams who were armed with assault rifles. The IDF units in the area were initially busy trying to fend off the surprise assault, so the first organized IDF response took a few hours as units located in other areas of Israel were rushed to the Gaza border. On arrival, they began trying to understand what was happening and determining how to allocate themselves to deal with the situation, including formulating a means of protecting villages not yet attacked in the initial strike. Those are the villages of Judea that you read about so often in the Bible, by the way. Bethlehem is little amongst the thousands of Judah. That's the area. They began gradually counter-attacking inside the villages captured by Hamas forces, combing the areas to find and kill the terrorists. And they are terrorists, not militants. If you're listening to media calling them militants, stop listening. Once a Hamas force was deemed destroyed, the IDF units evacuated Israeli residents who had locked themselves inside their homes during the onslaught. They also surrounded Hamas teams holding hostages. The IDF units have been going through residential areas house by house, room by room. They still are, searching for terrorists to kill or capture and collecting Israeli survivors and bodies. The evacuated residents are being sent north to central Israel, and they're being received by kibbutzim over there. There's schools that have been converted into shelters to receive them. And then, of course, some Jews have opened their private homes and are receiving them into their rooms. Other units combed the areas between the villages to search for scattered civilians, especially from the Nature Party, and other Hamas teams that might be hiding there waiting for an opportunity to strike when things seem to calm down. That would be, I would do that, right? If you're a terrorist, I would make you think that the attack is over, and you would have ensconced, entrenched terrorists who have hid within Jewish territory, ready to be activated at an opportune time. Guys who would have been trained in survival skills and being able to stay independent and function independently for days at a time within Jewish territory. So That's something they have to keep an eye out too. I wonder if some of them smuggled in a nuclear bomb. I mean, who knows? You don't know what's happening next. All the hostages held in Israeli territory have been rescued, the Besa Center is saying. But approximately 130 Israelis, the figure claimed by Hamas spokesperson, including civilians, both male and female, the elderly, young children, and soldiers, were kidnapped and taken to Gaza. Hamas claims it has placed them in underground installations. Well, the number is probably exaggerated if they're saying 130. You can easily cut that in half. That's one too many, of course. When it comes to hostage situations, Israel is the elite country in the world for that. They basically invented hostage rescue operations and hostage negotiations. Germany and the US ask for Israeli expertise in situations like this when it happens on their soil. And what's interesting here, let me show you the book. I want to show you a book that you could read that's really, really interesting. One second. Go. Okay, by the way, if there's no lag and the feed is good, the audio and the video, let me know in the comments, because we were having real hard time with that a couple days ago. Martino is asking, let's see here. Would God destroy the Palestinians for attacking Israel? Eventually, yes, but we have to keep in mind what spirit we are of and what spirit he is of. The Lord wants to save the Palestinians, and he wants to save the Jews too, because they're both condemned to hell. But there is national retribution, absolutely. How the Lord works that in his counsels is up to him. So you need a balanced biblical response to that. Here's the book. I don't know if you can see that. It's called 90 Minutes at Entebbe. My live is not synced, so 90 Minutes at Entebbe, you can get it. What this is, Black September organization, I think in the 70s, hijacked an Israeli El Al plane with like 106 passengers and then flew it into Uganda. So the Ugandan president at the time, Idi Amin Dada, coordinated with the Yasser Arafat and another guy, and they had 106 hostages. And so Israel developed a very daring rescue plan. And what they did, it's an amazing thing. It's almost out of the movies, but it's a real story. What they did is that they recreated the convoy of Idi Amin Dada. They hired a black man that looked like him, and then they recreated his convoy with the whatever it was, Mercedes cars or limousine cars, and they loaded up that convoy into a cargo plane, flew into Uganda, and landed in Uganda's airport, national airport. The convoy came out of the airplane, and the Ugandan security forces thought that was the convoy of their president, and so they let them in. Some of the prisoners, if not all of them, the hostages, were being held in the airport. So that's how the Israelis deceived them, got in, rescued all the hostages. Not one of them was lost. At the very end, as they were. By the time the Ugandans had figured out what was going on, they started shooting at the Israelis who were loading the hostages back into that airplane to fly them back to Israel. The last guy out there protecting the file was Jonathan Netanyahu, the brother of the current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And Jonathan Netanyahu is named after a born-again Christian who was instrumental in the creation of this, in the War of Independence of Israel. And his parents, the parents of the Netanyahus, the parents were thankful and to him and named their son Jonathan after him. So the brother of the current prime minister died in that rescue operation, and the current prime minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself was part of that elite rescue unit. So he actually personally knows about hostage situations. And when you take hostages, the guys who were held in hostage in Israel, that's known as a sterile environment because you have time to plan and negotiate. But the ones who are abducted and taken into the Gaza Strip, every hour that passes by makes it that much more difficult to rescue those people. And that's because it gives the Palestinians time to bury them deeper. It gives the Palestinians time to move them around. There's the possibility that some of those hostages are going to be moved out of Gaza, sent into Egypt, maybe with the Muslim Brotherhood, sent into Lebanon, sent into Syria, and then it'll become a lot harder to negotiate for their release. And the idea is that the Hamas is asking for the liberation of all of the Palestinian prisoners in exchange for their hostages. They have shot some of them. They've beheaded a soldier, and I think they've shot or executed 3 or 4 others. To give you an idea how much Israel values life, and again, I know they're sinful people and they're stiff-necked and they're contrary to all men. Still, they do value life. A few years ago, they exchanged, I forget how many living prisoners. It was some ridiculous number, like scores and scores, if not hundreds. They exchanged them for 5 corpses of dead soldiers. For 5 corpses. Not even living soldiers. They wanted to retrieve the bodies. And the Muslims know that, so they're going to leverage. If they do have 100 or so abductees, they're going to leverage that. That's really painful situation for Israel. They need to be rescued immediately. Please pray for them. I would pray for them if they were Muslims who were innocent civilian Muslims who were abducted by Jews. We would pray for their release too. I mean, imagine if you're the parent of one of those children. I can't imagine what that's like. I really can't. I'm glad it's a blessing, guys. Just every once in a while, if you can let me know in the comment that the audio and the video is good. It's hard for me to tell here. All right. They're hiding them. They go through tunnels like rats. Literally like rats. By early afternoon of October 8th, so I'm reading from a Israeli think tank here. This is not just some internet article. By early afternoon of October 8th, the number of confirmed Israeli casualties had reached at least 700. Now they're saying 1,000. And 2,240 wounded, some with grave injuries, so they might die, and the number of dead is going to change. There are at least another 700 Israeli citizens whose names are known, but who are unaccounted for. Some might be dead and yet not discovered. Others might be among the kidnapped. Others might still be in hiding somewhere out of touch. And of course, some names aren't known. Hamas casualties are currently estimated to be at least 400 killed and almost 2,000 wounded. That was as of yesterday, so that number would have changed. These figures include those hit inside of Israel and those hit in Israeli counterstrikes in Gaza. Dozens more have been captured. Since these numbers were declared, there have been numerous skirmishes as IDF troops continue to comb the residential and open areas to a distance of several kilometers from the border with Gaza. Of interesting note here, Russian media is showing a map that Palestinians are controlling the land, the Jewish areas, kilometers east of the Gaza fence, that's not true. In an ambitious raid in Gaza, Israeli naval commandos captured a senior commander of the Hamas naval commando force. All right. Now, the Israeli government has officially declared war, which legally allows them to take more drastic steps than in peacetime. And the government has ordered the IDF to conduct a mass mobilization of reserves. It has also ordered the beginning of an aerial offensive response on Hamas targets in Gaza, which you can see here on the live. Sometimes they show you that. That's supposed to be a live feed. Now they've cut the live feed. They're just showing you images of the destruction, but the live should return in a second. The initial strikes were delayed. Listen to this. The initial strikes were delayed to allow Palestinian civilians to hide. That's something that you don't hear on mainstream media. But what Israel does is before a strike on Gaza, they used to have I don't know if they still do that, but they used to have a software program that would call all the landlines, the phones, and would warn the inhabitants, the civilians, to flee because an airstrike was coming. They would drop leaflets from airplanes warning that an airstrike is coming. Imagine the Muslims doing that. The Muslims kidnap kids. Now, one of the reasons Israel does this, of course, is not just because they're also righteous and the Palestinians are all also evil. It's because the public opinion is against them and they want to be very careful not to kill a civilian. So you have to factor that too. But you don't even hear of that. Look, I'm in Montreal. The most sophisticated, the largest hospital, one of the largest hospitals in Montreal is the Jewish General Hospital. When I go there, I see Muslim patients being treated with the hijab, the niqab, the whole thing. I mean, religious Muslims. They go to the Jewish General Hospital to be treated. When we go there, when my wife gave, 2 of our 3 children were birthed in the Jewish General Hospital, and the physicians that took care of my wife, the anesthesiologist, for example, was a Saudi, a Muslim Saudi. And at one point, her physician was another Muslim Saudi. Where do you see that in the Muslim world? Imagine a Muslim country where you have a Jewish hospital. Would that be allowed? Or you wouldn't see that. What Muslim country would receive Jews into an Islamic, what country in the world, what Islamic hospital in any country in the world would receive Jews, religious Jews, and care for them? It says something that the Muslims, trust the Jews to care for them. They trust them with their health. What Jew could trust a Muslim with his health in an Islamic hospital? But you don't hear about that in mainstream media. Again, I'm not saying that to whitewash the Jews. We know how wicked they are. We know that they are stiff-necked. We know how proud they are. Paul himself says they are contrary to all men, and the wrath has come upon them unto the uttermost. If you read your Bible, that book, the Holy Bible, is the most pro-Israel book you will ever read, and it's the most anti-Israel you will ever read, which tells me that that's a book from God, because it's a balanced book. It's heaven's point of view being given on the people. Their sins are exposed. The sins of their leaders are exposed. You don't read that in the Quran. In the Quran, Muslims are the khairul ummatin or khairul umam. They're like the best of nations, you know. You don't read that in the Bible. You can trust the Bible. But I'm just saying, give me an example. What can you imagine a Muslim country? Can you imagine Pakistan, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, maybe now Saudi Arabia because they're signing a peace deal with Israel. One of the reasons why Iran would want to destabilize it and prod Hamas into launching its offensive. Where? Egypt? Indonesia? Libya? Jordan? Where would you have Jews, religious Jews, being cared for in medical facilities? Audio and video are great. Okay, thank you, Brother Norman. But I go on. So they warned them. They warned the civilians to flee, so they delayed their raids. And then by the evening of October 8th, that's Sunday, it was reported that about 75,000 Gaza residents had relocated to designated safe areas, clearing the declared areas for free action by the IDF. In the late evening of that night, Sunday night, the Israeli Air Force struck approximately 800 targets in Gaza, and the Navy also struck some. They included residential buildings used by Hamas for hiding command posts, combat positions, and storage sites, 2 banks, numerous weapons storage sites, and some launchers of Hamas and other armed groups. In addition, Hamas troops moving to and fro from the border between combat positions and launch sites were detected by surveillance drones and attacked. Well, it's another thing you need to know. These are things we know also from Hezbollah and Lebanon Muslims. If you know any kind of history, what Hamas does is they place their rocket launching machinery, they place it in schools. They shoot out of schools and they shoot out of hospitals, thus binding Israel's response. And if Israel strikes the school, well, that's going to be all over mainstream media internationally. It's going to sway public opinion, and it's going to make Israel look like the big bad guy who is striking defenseless children. And that's broadcast all over the Muslim world. But that's what they do. They literally use, literally, and this is not an expression, they'll actually put their kids and shoot from behind their kids. They'll use them as human shields. If you want to see a video of that, it's hard to watch. I didn't know that footage was in the video. I bought a documentary on Iran a few years back called Iranium, like uranium, but Iranium. It was about the nuclear program. And there's footage there about the Iran-Iraq war. My wife, by the way, is Iraqi. She was born in Baghdad. At the tail end of the Iran-Iraq war, my father-in-law was part of that war. He's a Mandaean Iraqi. And what Saddam Hussein had done is Iraq had done, they had littered the border between Iran and Iraq with mines. Do you know what was Iran's technique for deactivating the mines? There's footage of that, if you can bear to watch it. They would line up ranks of children, files of children, with bandanas with Islamic verses from the Quran and black flags and Islamic green flags. And they would chant, they would rile up the kids. I'm talking about children, like they're like 10 years old. And then they would let them loose to run across the minefield on the Iraqi border. And as the children are running, the mines are just exploding. And so the children would, by their lives, clear out the minefield, and then the army would advance. And that was totally acceptable to the population because, hey, those children are going to paradise. This is the kind of people that you're dealing with. The West has no concept. Their mind just can't process it. That's why they don't believe it. One of the reasons why the West, like America, United States, the Vatican, one of the reasons why they were slow in their response to the Holocaust, you can go read the reports, is they just couldn't believe the reports. They're like, there's no way those Jews are lying. There's no way that the Nazis would do this. Let me tell you something here also. The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem during World War II was an ally of Hitler. There was a Nazi extension formed from Muslim Arabs during the Second World War. Check that out. This is what you're dealing with. So you've got your rocket launcher shooting out of a school. Well, what do you do? And your people are dying. What do you do? It's a tough decision. But that's the kind of decision that Israel is facing. And when the media shows you pictures of little Israel, little Palestine, they've got like Gaza like this, and look at Israel, how big, and the big bad boy. Zoom out a little more and you'll see that Israel is surrounded by 22 Islamic nations, 65 times in size, demographically utterly and completely dwarfed. They're the minority there. And again, I'm not whitewashing Israel. I know their sins are mighty. And in part, this is the judgment of God for their rejection and their utter hatred for the Son of God and the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Would God that they would repent and believe the gospel. We'd all be done, man. Hurry up and believe Israel. Now, the mobilization of reserves, they have called, I think the number I read was 300,000. 300,000 is getting ready for an all-out war. That tells you that they're probably going to go into Gaza. If you're wondering if there's going to be a ground operation to Gaza, you don't call up 300,000 reservists if there isn't a ground operation. They're also, of course, going to line them up along the northern border with Lebanon. That's the big deal right there. Let's see here. The IDF has ordered the beginning of an aerial offensive response. We read that. Some IDF units are heading towards the border with Lebanon in case Hezbollah decides to join the war. Others are reinforcing the forces in Judea and Samaria or replacing regular units being sent to Gaza. Residents in some of the Israeli villages along the Lebanese border are being evacuated. That's what I'm interested in seeing. I'm Lebanese. I've been to southern Lebanon a couple times. My uncle was a pastor in southern Lebanon. Let me tell you, it was so hard for him to preach in southern Lebanon. The Catholics and the Orthodox ran my uncle out. And my uncle was a missionary in Jerusalem for 30 years because the Christians, nominal Christians of southern Lebanon, burnt his car. They told him, if you preach here next Sunday, we're going to burn your car. He did, and they did burn his car. So southern Lebanon, again, if you'd only repent, the southern Lebanese ran out the Baptist preachers and they reaped Hezbollah in exchange. Congratulations. You sowed the wind and you reaped the whirlwind. Let me see here what the updates are from Amir Sarfati's feed there on Telegram. Israeli artillery at work.
War crimes.
That's the Hezbollah commander that was killed by the IDF during the infiltration earlier today. With a Kalashnikov. Most sold weapon of all time. This is a video from Sidon in Lebanon. You in your King James Bible, that's spelled Zidon with a Z. Ambulances leave Beirut for southern Lebanon. Video from Zidon. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the political aspect of that in a second. They could release rats or robots. Robots would be expensive. Rats, that's funny. That's a good idea for releasing rats into the tunnels. All right. I can't believe that those are Israelis. What kind of a training is that? Standing like that in the middle of the road. You have no idea. You don't know what's in that car, what kind of weaponry. That's bizarre. That's surprising.
Hussein! 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 Hey, فداي ثلاثة
עכשיו לי מחבל.
הרכב הפייזוט פיקל, שתי מחבלים מחוסנים ברכב, הרכב היה עם צ'קלקה עליו, נראה על פניו שזה מחבלים בוודאות, יש להם קלאצ'ים, שניהם חוסלו בוודאות.
So that's them neutralizing a terrorist. The pace of airstrikes on Gaza is 5 times what it was on Hezbollah in the Second Lebanon War. There are no more terrorists crossing the fence. We have achieved full control of the Israeli territory surrounding Gaza. Amir Sarfati saying he's a Christian pastor in Israel. He served in the IDF. We have information about all the abductees. We have already informed 30 families. The official number of Israeli casualties rolls to 900, but from what I know, it's much higher. Okay, so let's go back to what we were doing over here. There's the live feed again. You can see that on, if you're interested in the live feed, that is on First Post. That's a live feed, and when something happens, they usually pan out their camera, so it is interesting to watch. Other events, shortly after 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, Hezbollah fired a number of mortar bombs at an Israeli strongpoint on the border with Lebanon. The IDF returned fire with artillery. At the time of writing, it is not clear whether this exchange was a harbinger for an escalation or an isolated incident. In Egypt, an Egyptian policeman opened fire on a bus full of Israeli tourists. He killed 2 of them and wounded some more. He also killed an Egyptian. In East Jerusalem now also, you have the Arab residents. East Jerusalem is inhabited by Arabs rioting, so they're going to have to contain that very quickly. All right, the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies asks this: why now? Why was the attack now? I'll read you their analysis. My throat is dry, guys. Just give me a second so I can drink some water. So they're saying the answer to this question is not clear. Several excuses were quickly published, such as the fact that Jews were allowed to pray on the Temple Mount, which like that this is the reason why you probably would hear that in the mainstream media, that the Jews prayed on Temple Mount and that's why Hamas has done this. If you remember, one of the intifadas was caused by Ariel Sharon taking a walk towards Temple Mount. That's a silly. This only look, an attack like this takes months to plan, not weeks. Months. This is coordinated to the level that I know Arabs. There's a state actor here involved. Whoever that is. That takes months. So this has nothing to do with what happened a couple of days ago. That's just silly. You don't come up with... It's hard to coordinate the Zoom meeting. You're going to coordinate this in a couple of days. Forget it. But only 2 days passed from that event till the attack. The extent and level of organization of this offensive proves that it was planned earlier. Speaking of Zoom meetings, by the way, I teach an online seminar called the Council and Might Seminary. And if you're interested in that, I've got some videos on Council and Might. You can look back in previous videos and watch. We're now in year 1, trimester 1. We've already had 5 sessions, so it may be too much to catch up now. But you may want to sign up for the second trimester beginning in January. That's a 3-year course. So if you're interested in that, send me an email to cams@gmail.com. That's Council and Might Seminary. So CAM like Michael S. cams@gmail.com. All right, some believe Hamas felt it had to pressure Israel to improve the dire economic situation in Gaza. However, but that's not true. Israel has been helping Gaza's economic situation forever. That's only, again, Western thinkers can think something like that, because the Japhethite, something to understand here is you have to understand the different mentalities of the three races. And you have three races in the Bible. Anybody that tells you otherwise doesn't believe his Bible. It doesn't mean that one race is more valuable to God than others. We're all made of one blood, but quote the rest of the verse of Paul, he says that God has set the boundaries of their habitations. You have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Africa belongs to Ham, Europe to Japheth, and Asia to Shem. And those are three different mindsets. The Japhethites prioritize, for a Japhethite, the material world is what is the ultimate reality. The Japhethite mind calculates in terms of pros and cons, plus and minuses. Should I take this course of action? Well, if I take this course of action, then here's what I gain. But if I don't take it, here's what I lose. And they kind of weighs plus and minuses in materialistic terms and comes to a conclusion. The Shemitic mind is not like that. Now, the Palestinians, that's a long story. Again, if you want to know about the origin of the Palestinians, my grandparents were Palestinian Greeks. My grandmother was born in Bethlehem. If you want to know about this, I've got a video about that. Ancient Philistines versus modern Palestinians. Check it out, and you can get the history there. But they operate like a Shemitic mind. The Shemitic mind, calculations of pros and cons, economic stuff doesn't really factor in. Shem, Noah said, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem." They've got spiritual considerations in mind, however mistaken. So for them, like, if I can hurt my enemy, if I can shame my enemy, if I can obtain paradise, then I don't care. If you're gonna hit my home and destroy it with a bomb, you're putting a badge of honor on me that I can boast of before God and the angels and the Muslim community. And you have to speak their language if you're gonna deter them. If Israel wants to deter them, not even bombs can really deter them fully. It doesn't work that way. They don't think like you think, and you have to understand that. To give you an example, a historic example of somebody that understood the Muslim language and communicated with that language with Muslims and achieved a 20-year deterrence is General MacArthur. Am I still live on, guys? I can't tell if I'm still live on or not. If I'm still live, let me know in the comments, please. And if there's no lag. General MacArthur, I think right after World War II, was in the Philippines. And you had already back in those days a Muslim radical group who were terrorizing the Filipinos and, of course, attacking the American army. And they caught a few of them. And here's what MacArthur did. He lined up those terrorists that they had caught, lined them up. And then he made them watch as they slaughtered a pig. The Americans slaughtered a pig. And then they dipped the bullets into pig's blood and executed them with the bullets dipped in pig's blood. Now, in Islam, a pig is haram. It's an unclean animal. And in the Muslim mind, that basically could bar your way from entering into paradise because you're dying with pig's blood in your body. And he left one survivor, one witness of what they had done. MacArthur sent him back and he said, "Go and tell the rest that if we catch them, we're going to do that to them." And for something like the next 20 years, there were no more terrorist attacks in the Philippines. That is an example of speaking their language. They understand that. Even this, what you're seeing there, I mean, just look at your feet. They're shooting back. They're shooting back. Israel is hampered by public opinion, international opinion, but they're paying a big price for it. All right, now another theory here that they discuss, the Besa Center discusses, and some of you have asked about that, is that this action was fomented by Iran. Hamas and Hezbollah officials have stated that Iran backed it, assisted in the planning, and approved the offensive. Now, they have no particular reason to lie about this, though crediting Iran could be a ploy of psychological warfare that enhances Iran's picture in the Middle East as a power. Already the Sunnis are afraid of Iran. One of you had asked about this. Let me go back and double check the question. Is it possible that Iran ordered the attack because Saudi Arabia and Israel were normalizing relations, and it would be harder for Iran to attack in future if relations were normalized by Saudi Arabia. Yes, that's very well possible. So, this is a broader geopolitical question. Let me explain on the map what is going on with that. Let me give you a little bit of a historical, geopolitical background here on this. I need a good map. I need a good map. All right, let's zoom out. Can you hear me, guys? Okay, now how do I want to make that as small as possible? Here we go. Yes, thank you. Okay. You know where Israel is, where my cursor is? I wonder if I can draw on that screen. That would be really cool. Let me try something out. Too bad I can't draw. Okay. Here's Israel. What you need to understand is not only the Muslim geographical context in which Israel exists, but the two main divisions in Islam. And there are two. That's the Sunnis, you may have heard that term, and the Shiites. Sunni and Shia. The difference is, what are those two things? When Muhammad died, even though he had committed fornication and raped dozens of women, he left no male heir, which is really surprising. That's really a judgment of God. If you read the kind of judgments that God brings on the Antichrist, that spells judgment of God on him. Well, that created a crisis. Because here's the Khalifa, not the Khalifa, he's the head of the Islamic nation. He dies without a designated successor. Now, at the point of death, at the moment of death, one of his, I think his father-in-law, if I'm not mistaken, took over as what is known as the Khalifa. He is the inheritor. He is the next in line, the successor, ruling over what had began to be a Muslim empire as the Muslims, the Arabs, came out of the Arabian Peninsula and started conquering parts of the Byzantine Empire. This is in the 7th century AD. The Middle East was not Arabic at that point. It was not. It was filled with Europeans and Greeks. It was filled with Phoenicians and Canaanites. It was filled with Romans. It was filled with all kinds of things. Some Arabs, yes, but the Arabs came out of the Arabian Peninsula. So one thing you want to keep in mind, the audio is good. Okay, thank you, Brother Norman. One thing you want to keep in mind, is the video good too? Is when you see the Middle East and you think of it as Arab, and all those Arabs are chanting against the fact that the Jews took their land, my people are forgotten in all this, which is the Aramaic people, the Syriac people. My original language of my people is Aramaic, not Arabic. The Arabs were over here in the Arabian Peninsula, so which is Saudi Arabia. Now it's known as Saudi Arabia. Back then it was Hijaz, just Arabia. Saudi is a tribe that took over in the beginning of the 20th century. Yemen, Oman, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, that's Arabia. They came out and dispossessed the Roman Empire, and they conquered the Syriac people. They dispossessed the Christians. They dispossessed the Africans, took over all of North Africa, all of the Middle East, went over as far as Iran and Pakistan, Afghanistan and Turkey. So the Arabs belong here, but they've taken over all that, and nobody talks about that. And the Jews are this little invisible almost dot on your screen. Everybody talks about that. So let me remind you, the Middle East is not Arabic. The Arabian Peninsula is Arabic. The Middle East has been conquered by Arabs, which today they claim as their own. They dispossessed my people. But who's talking about that? Nobody. You only hear it on channels like this, and if you go to a Bible-believing church. Okay, so Abu Bakr takes over, which is I think the father-in-law of Muhammad, and for one or two Khalifa successors, everybody's kind of okay. Those are the Sahaba, which are known basically like the apostles of the prophets. Those were his companions, the close entourage. There's a generation of those that succeed each other as the heads of the Muslim nation. But eventually, there's a division. There's two factions, major factions are going to form. Imagine like a church split, a church where a founding pastor dies and there was no designated pastor, if I can kind of relate it to you guys. And then there's a big debate over who should take over. The son-in-law of the pastor or somebody that the church is going to vote on, something like that. That's basically what happens. For reasons of political gain, personal gain, you would line up with one of the two factions. So the Sunni faction, they claim that the criterion for succeeding the Muhammad, their false prophet, is any Muslim, a righteous Muslim that we agree on. Any righteous Muslim, whether he's related to Muhammad or not. The Shias, they were arguing that it had to be, thank you, brother, it had to be a relative of Muhammad, a blood relative of Muhammad. Now, he doesn't have any he didn't have any sons, but he had a nephew. He had some nephews. I think his grandnephew is Ali. So those are the two factions that developed. The Sunnis believe that it's any Muslim, any righteous Muslims. The Shias believe that it has to be a relative of Muhammad. So you've got that political division, but then you have theological ramifications for those two political divisions. From those two political divisions, you will have theological differences also. The Sunnis are the literalists of the Muslim world, and they are by far and away the demographic majority of the Muslim world. They believed in a very strict, very literalist interpretation of the Quran, whereas the Shias believe in that the Quran has a hidden meaning behind the text, and that the Imams can have more leeway in the interpretation of the text. That basically the equivalent would be like this: the Shias are like the charismatics of the Muslim world, if you will, and the Sunnis are the fundamentalists of the Muslim world. But they're both dangerous, of course. But you know how the charismatic will tell you, well, I know what the Bible says, but I'm led by the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit kind of gives me another sense to just the written text on the paper. You may have heard charismatics argue that way. That's how the Shiites argue relative to the Quran, whereas the Sunnis are saying there is no hidden meaning, there is no extra leading of any of God. It's what it says on the paper, and that's it. Also, the Shiites have a messianic outlook. They are expecting a messianic deliverance. The Sunnis, yes, but less so. That's not as present in their mindset as it is with the Shias. So that's the division. Now, as I said, demographically, by far and away, the Sunnis are the majority. Now, when I say Sunnis, you want to know here. Egypt, majoritarily Sunni. 100 million people, over 100 million people. Libya, Sunni. Tunisia, I think majoritarily Sunni. Morocco, Sunni. Algeria, Sunni. Western Sahara, Sunni. Mauritania, Sunni. Most of Africa is Sunni. I think Sierra Leone has and Senegal have a lot of Shias. Arabia, Sunni. Hardcore Sunni. They're part of the Wahhabi school of interpretation. That's like, they're fundamentalists among the fundamentalists. United Arab Emirates, Sunni. Oman, Sunni. Yemen is kind of split. That's where you have the Houthi rebels. You may have heard about them. They're Shiites, and that's why Iran is backing them up. Azerbaijan is actually Shia, but for political reasons, it's being backed by Israel and against Iran. Afghanistan, Sunni. Pakistan, Sunni. Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Sunni. Turkey, definitely Sunni. Where does that leave us? Iran is majoritarily Shia. And the Iranians are not Arabs. You need to understand that. They are Persians. They're not Arabs. And they're brilliant. This is the old Persian Empire, which figures prominently in the last days. If you remember, the beast that comes out in Revelation chapter 13 has the feet of a bear. The bear was Persia. That's for sure. The bear is Persia. So the Persian kingdom, there's a Persian element to the Antichrist kingdom in the last days, which means that unless the Lord delays the mystery of iniquity, unless he delays it yet again and thwarts it, and says no, it's going to be for later, then Iran is basically on an unstoppable course of power. There's nothing you can do about it, unless, of course, the Holy Spirit thwarts it. See. So you shouldn't be surprised that Iran has so much influence. It's surrounded by Sunnis, and it's very aware of that. Now you think, well, they're saying they're both Muslims. Both of them are Muslims. Why do they hate each other so much? There's a saying of Muhammad that has authority in the Muslim world, where he prophesies that after his death, his ummah, his nation, would be subdivided into 72 different groups, 72 different denominations, and only one of these would experience salvation. And a lot of the Muslim world believes that, which means, from their point of view, that the other Muslims, whether they be Sunni or Shia or Ismaili or whatever it is, are not only, they don't only differ in theology, they're not only like heretics, they are damned heretics, and it is lawful to kill them, which is why Muslims feel justified in killing other Muslims. And if they feel justified in killing other Muslims, how much more in killing Christians and killing Jews, whom they believe are cursed of God, that we have gone the wrong way. That's the opening chapter of the Quran about us, that we have gone the wrong way. Okay, so Iran is surrounded by Sunnis. If I can zoom in here. Iraq is also majoritarily Shia, 60%. The one who ran it, Saddam Hussein, was Sunni. So it was a demographically majoritarily Shia country, but the Sunnis were ruling it until Saddam Hussein was killed. Now Iran effectively controls Iraq, and demographically, theologically, they're the same. They're two majoritarily Shia country. This is the old kingdom of Babylon, Persia, the Assyrian kingdom. Assyria and Babylon are one, by the way, in the Bible, prophetically. Okay, so let's back up now a little bit. How did Iran come to be so powerful, and how did the Shiites come to be so powerful? Well, in part, this is the proverbial chickens coming home to roost. In the 70s, Iran was ruled by a Shah, a secular kind of a man, a royal family, and he had allowed the British to come in and dig up the oil. They had their oil wells, and he was living a life of abundance and prosperity, and the country was suffering economically, of course. And Israel is surrounded by Sunni nations vowed to their destructions, Quranic literalists. And so the Israelis actually helped the Islamic revolution of Iran to succeed. They helped Khomeini to take over. in 79. There was a coup in 79, if you remember. I don't know if you remember or if you read history. So they helped oust the Shah and install the Islamic Revolution. Why? Because they were Shiites. And that would create a Shiite center of power, which would counterbalance the Sunni power in the Middle East. And while the Shiites and the Sunnis are busy killing each other, Israel could kind of slip, out of the radar. And it does succeed. It did succeed. That's why you had a 9-year war between Iran and Iraq from 1980 to 1989. My father told me, I can't tell you too much about my dad, but he told me that, and he would know this almost firsthand, that Israel was repairing Iran's airplanes. Iran's weaponry during the Iraq War was American. And the idea was exactly that. Prop up the Shias so they can counterbalance the Sunni. I mean, it makes sense. I probably would have done the same. But it may succeed in the medium term even. But in the long term, you never know. Now, Iran are Persians. Look, I'm part Arabic, okay? With respect to all due respect to Arabs, Persians are much smarter than Arabs. The Arabs are part Ishmaelite. They are wild. Maybe the Arabs are smart, but they are wild, and they have a hard time being disciplined and coordinated and controlled. The Persians are brilliant. Even in the days of the Muslim Empire, which was majoritarily Arab, Islam is an Arabic religion. The ones who ran the Muslim Empire, the Baramakid family, for example, of history, the bureaucrats were Persians. That is well known in Islamic history. They are very intelligent people, very capable people. And of course, it's the old Persian Empire that you're messing with. You're messing with the old bear. You're messing with the bear. So now what you've had is Iran grew and grew and grew. And with the ousting of Saddam Hussein, now you have Shia in Iran, Shia in Iraq. What about Syria? Now, their dream is to create a Shiite crescent in the Middle East, and they have effectively succeeded. Syria is majoritarily Sunni also, but it's ruled by Hafiz al-Assad. Hafiz al-Assad, I'm still living in the 90s. Hafiz al-Assad is dead. His son, Bashar al-Assad. Now, the Assad family are Alawites. Remember when I was saying about Ali, the nephew of Muhammad? Some people believed he should be the Khalifa, the successor. The Alawites take their name from Ali. It's the equivalent of Jesuites from Jesus, Alawites from Ali. They are an extreme form of Shia. They even believe in the divinity of Ali. So they think of Ali the way you and me think of Jesus, that he was a man, but he was a divine man. And that is very heretical in the Muslim world. But they're Shiites and they rule Syria. That's why Iran helped prop up the Assad regime in Syria, because he's theologically similar to them. I forget what a Catholic cardinal said, all conflict is ultimately theological, and that is very true. That's true. So what do we got now demographically? Am I still alive, guys? Or did this thing cut off a long time ago and I'm talking to myself? Let me know if I'm still alive. So Shia in Iran, Shia in Iraq, Shia regime in Syria. What about Lebanon? We're getting close to Israel. See what we're doing now? Well, Lebanon was a creation of the French Mandate after World War I. And it was carved out and given to the nominal Christians as a French protectorate in a sea of Muslims. That was a great thing. And we blew it because they're nominal Christians who worship idols and images. And they lined up with the Muslims and the Arabs. Demographically, the Muslims have taken over. So Lebanon was divided. It was majoritarily Catholic or Orthodox, but demographically now it has become Muslims. In the 70s, the Sunnis were in power. Some of you may remember this. Remember the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat? What he was doing back in the 70s is what Hezbollah is doing today. Now, they were Sunni. Palestinians are Sunni. Yasser Arafat set up his base of operations from Lebanon to limit the striking ability of Israel and would attack and plot against Israel out of Lebanon. And because he was Sunni, he was being backed by Egypt, because he's part Egyptian, which is Sunni, and Saudi Arabia, which is Sunni. Today, with the rise of Iran, Hezbollah has taken over, which is Shiite instead of the PLO, and they hold Lebanon hostage. Now, the Shiites in Lebanon, They weren't even known as Shia. We used to call them Tewli. They were like basically the servants of the Lebanese. They were the lower class Muslims, and the Sunnis looked down on them. So they have like this inferiority complex, the Shias, that not only are we demographically lesser, but we were always the poor we were always like the garbage men and the uneducated of the country. Well, now it's our time. Who are they now? These guys are they think of themselves as Arabs, but who are they being backed by? Iran. Now Iran is not Arabic, but Iran is Shiite like them. And the Palestinians are not Shia, but Iran is backing them up. They're Sunni because they're willing to attack Israel, and that makes Shiite Islam look like the legitimate brand of Islam. They can say, basically, the Persians can say, you see, it's the Shias. Thank you, Brother Eric. We miss you, man. Still praying for you and your family to be able to come back to us. We're the ones who are taking on Israel, not you guys. Saddam Hussein, when he used to launch in the 90s, if you recall, he was launching the Scud missiles against Israel. He was the hero. Look at me. I'm a Sunni Muslim. I'm attacking Israel. You get legitimacy points in the Muslim world based on how well you can oppose Israel and you can hurt Israel. That's how it works. Israel is uniting, the uniting bond of the Muslim world. If the Muslims ever succeeded in destroying Israel and all the Jews, which God says you have a better luck canceling day and night than being able to pull that one off. But if they ever did, theoretically, they would have nothing uniting them anymore, and they would turn on each other and destroy each other. So the Arabs would fall along with Israel. So what do you have now? You have a Shia axis. Yemen, I told you there's some Shias there, but basically here's the axis. Right now, what you're seeing on the ground, Shia in Iran, Shia in Iraq, Shia in Syria, Shia in Lebanon, and you have this Shia crescent. The monster has grown that they created. They created a monster to balance against the Sunni power, and boy, they succeeded too well because the Persians turned out to be a lot smarter than they estimated. And now the Sunni world, which used to hate Israel, still does. Nothing has changed. But they're so afraid of the Shia, who believe they can kill other Sunnis because they're damned, and vice versa, by the way. The Shias will attack the Sunnis, Israel won't. So now the Sunni world is forming alliances with Israel because they're afraid of the Shia axis. Iran sees its chance to shine. Their dream is almost a reality. This is the old Persian kingdom. Israel now is building an alliance with the Sunni nations. They're not going to have that. So yes, it is possible that Iran did or coordinate. There's no way the Gazans did that on their own. The Palestinians did that on their own. Okay, I know them. They could not have done that on their own. No way. So definitely Iran would. Iran is incentivized to scupper the Sunni-Israel alliance. Absolutely. The big question is, why hasn't Hezbollah joined in? If you're looking just for the sheer element of surprise and you want to overwhelm Israel and eradicate the country, the state, why not attack simultaneously from Syria and Lebanon? That's the big question. And I'll read you a little bit more of the strategic analysis of the Besa Center. So they say, another theory is that this action was fomented by Iran. While I read that, let me see if I can get you the live back up. So in their analysis, the Besa Center says, Hamas and Hezbollah officials have stated that, we read that, okay. Iran's envoy to the UN has denied Iranian involvement. However, Iran's backing, physical support, and funds and weapons and urging have been documented behind the surge in terror attacks in and emanating from Judea and Samaria over the past 2 years. In 2019, 2020, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2019 to 2020, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2020 to 2021, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2021 to 2022, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2022 to 2023, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2023 to 2024, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2024 to 2025, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2025 to 2026, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2026 to 2027, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2027 to 2028, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2028 to 2029, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2029 to 2030, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2030 to 2040, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2030 to 2040, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2040 to 2050, there's an increase in terrorist attacks. 2040 to 2050, there
Bye.
there's some logic to possible Iranian involvement in the current attack. Iran is deeply displeased with the progress and discussions on an agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. An agreement initiated very much as a treaty of cooperation against the common Iranian threat. Remember, Israel already has a peace deal with Egypt, Sunni. Israel already has a peace deal with Jordan, Sunni. Israel just pulled off a peace deal with the United Arab Emirates a couple of years ago, Sunni. Qatar is Sunni, but it's holding on. Qatar is playing both sides of the fence. Qatar is basically playing on the Shiite side. But they have a lot of money, so they can basically act independently. Just last week, Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, stated that Saudi Arabia is betting on a losing
This
horse.
simple line of code can increase your ad sales by 50 to 100% instantly. No changes in your business.
Yeah, bye. I got the Lord Jesus, amen. Don't eat that. So they basically want to present Israel as a losing horse. You're betting on a losing horse. The theory goes that the current attack was to prove Israel's weakness and give the Saudis second thoughts. Ah, baby. Sorry, those. It's good. Bravo, David. Good job. However, there's a weakness to this theory, the Besa Center says. That's the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. A combined attack with Hezbollah would seem to have been a better way of proving Israel's limitations. A Hezbollah offensive could yet be in the offing, but Israel is now more awake to the possibility and is preparing for it. Logic seems to dictate that a simultaneous offensive, like the one in 73, would have been a better course of action. There could, of course, be reasons why Iran might prefer a disjointed offensive action. So you pull the IDF into Gaza and then you attack Lebanon while you wait for Israel to commit boots on the ground in Gaza and then you attack from the north. Or they could have had problems of coordination. That's also possible. I mean, God intervenes in those things and he's going to get his counsel to pass. The live feed is too loud, sorry. I'll lower that. Thank you for letting me know. Now, this is their analysis about why the Hamas success. This is an issue that will require a very intensive inquiry after the war, like has happened after the 73. Golda Meir in 73, a few months after that war, stepped down. She resigned. Look, the biggest military and intelligence failure in the history of the state of Israel happened when a woman was at the helm. And I'm not saying this in the misogynistic spirit of lost people. God himself says one of the signs of judgment and one of the signs of the apostasy of a nation. One of the pejorative statements made about Israel is that he says, my people are, he says, women and children rule over them. Women were not created to rule. And if you point to Deborah, I would point out that I was an exception. And if you point to Golda Meir as an exception, I would remind you that Deborah called Barak and said, has not God told you to go take 10,000 men and go down Mount Tabor and attack? So she's basically telling him, you're the one who's supposed to do this. All right, close parenthesis. So the Basel Center says what you would expect. The supreme source of the failure is totally that of the intelligence services, which had concluded that Hamas was more interested in the economic well-being of its population than in furthering its ideological agenda by initiating a war that would damage the population's well-being. In line with this supposition, the government made various decisions to help the Gazan economy, but more importantly, the IDF assumed that the current scenario was simply not on the table and convinced the government that that was the case. How Hamas managed to plan, organize, and assemble its forces without Israeli intelligence services discovering it will be a very deep analysis once the war is over. While the details differ and will only come to light in an inquiry, in principle, this is the 1973 fiasco all over again. Why? All right, it's not just a failure of intelligence services. I was listening to no change of what? I lowered the live feed. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, brother. It's not just a failure of intelligence services. I listened to a former high-ranking IDF officer who was being interviewed on some small channel, And he said, look, yes, intelligence failure, yes, but your army is supposed to be positioned in a way at all times to expect a surprise attack, and even that wasn't the case. That's another element to think about. Now, the Bezos Center is saying this problem, this view, this mistaken view, has been exacerbated by a 25-year stint in by a 25-year shift in strategy concocted at the IDF's most senior levels based on new Western concepts of what wars are and how they are conducted. They don't go into detail about that, but basically the West is convinced that aerial superiority and that's it. We can all do it through electronic means now. And that's not true. I think Ruckman in his commentaries used to always say, you always need boots on the ground. And man, has he been proved right over and over and over again. It doesn't matter what level of technology you've got. I can talk about that if you... Okay. I'm not gonna because I want to stay on course, but if you want an illustration of asymmetric warfare and how successful it can be, basically using fishing boats against aircraft carriers can be surprisingly successful. I've got a video on the Mark of the Beast. Check it out on the channel here on Council Might Research. I think it's something like the Mark of the Beast will not be technological. And I argue there that the Mark of the Beast is possibly just that. It's not a ship, it's nothing technological. But I mentioned a military exercise conducted by the U.S. Army in 2000s, in the year 2000, at the behest of defense contractors, that illustrated that principle to a shocking and shameful extent. And they had to scrap the experiment and redo it according to their pre-written lines of success. You'll see what I mean. Just check the video. So, but that's basically what Western concepts are like. You don't need boots on the ground, just surveillance and aerial superiority. The result was a deliberate reduction in the size of IDF reserves in general and the number of days per year that they serve. This created a built-in shortage of available troops per mission the IDF is required to conduct. This shortage was dealt with by constantly shifting troops and taking risks in areas considered less imminently threatening. The recent need to reinforce IDF units in Judea and Samaria due to the escalation of attacks there caused the IDF to reduce its forces along the Gaza border, and why not, since IDF intelligence assessed that Hamas was not going to conduct a major offensive in the foreseeable future. Listen to the text that's been published from the interrogation of a captured Hamas terrorist. According to him, here's the outline. I'm going to show the outline. All right, but it's been a while. I lowered the volume here. So it should be good now. I know there's a little bit of a delay between what I'm recording and what you guys are commenting. Yeah. But I had lowered it. Let me know if it's fine now. Now, this is on... The reason why I show you this is because this is not just some internet site. This is an Israeli think tank that I've been following ever since the Beirut bomb in 2020. Here's what the captured terrorist has related to the IDF. He said Hamas had been preparing this attack for more than a year. Hamas was encouraged by the political demonstrations in Israel, seeing them as a sign of Israeli weakness. Of course, everybody... I've been expecting an attack. You ask my family. Months ago, I was walking around thinking to myself, when was the last war? We're due for a war, and the last one was 1973. And dates are very important in the Shemitic mindset. The symbolism of it is very important. We're going to hit 50 years in October 2023. And at a time like this, you have the country divided over judicial reforms. Of course, the country's divided. Let that be a lesson to all of us for our churches and for our families. We're so busy fighting each other, even amongst Christians, over silly theological differences. You can call them out, that's fine. But you should be able to still love your brother and work with him. Point number 3, the past week's riots conducted by Hamas were a deception to enable them to prepare their attack and hide the preparations. Number 4, the attack force included 1,000 men who broke through the border fence at 15 locations. And lastly, this terrorist and his unit were surprised that the IDF was not waiting for them. They operated inside Israel for about 5 hours before they met with armed resistance. So what's next? At the time of writing, early afternoon, October 8th, a few active terrorists remain inside Israel. The IDF is still busy clearing its territory of remnants of these Hamas teams. The question is, what comes afterwards? I am not privy, says the author, to the decisions of the rival leaders, so my answer to this question must be regarded as conjecture. Hamas is understandably overjoyed at its success, which is the worst defeat inflicted on Israel since October 6, 1973. They're partying in London, in the streets. They're partying in New York. They're partying in Montreal. They're partying in the Arab world. In 2001, when the 9/11 attack happened, they were passing out free ba'lewa. You would call it baklava. They were passing out free ba'lewa in the streets of Tripoli and Beirut. The Israeli government has declared its intention to conduct a major counter-offensive on Hamas in Gaza, the objective of which is to inflict mass casualties and destruction to the Hamas organization personnel and equipment. But it has not indicated the methods or timeline other than to say it will be a long war. Experience has shown that a purely aerial offensive, as conducted in the past, think 2006, that ended up really in a neutral war. That was neutral between Hezbollah and Israel. And it's perceived in the Arab world as a victory for Hezbollah. Even if significantly intensified, cannot achieve this objective. Absolutely. So it appears that a ground offensive will be conducted sooner or later, even if at first there is a prolonged aerial offensive to prepare the way. This will require preparation and will bring IDF units into dense urban terrain that favors the Hamas defenders who have considerably fortified it and trained in it. It therefore risks suffering heavy IDF casualties. It also risks inflicting major casualties to Palestinian civilians and prompting severe criticism by Israel's only major international supporter, the US, and God help us, it's President Biden at the helm. I'm not one of the people who think that everything Trump said and did was right, but that would not have happened under Trump. But the Lord allows these things. It will also take a long time to complete, and international support is unlikely to last very long. You better believe it. They go through a little bit of history here. That initial, coloring the parliament buildings an Israeli flag, that doesn't mean anything. And give it a matter of days. Once those videos are being released of dead Palestinian civilians and things like that, that moral, psychological backing of Israel is going to melt like snow in the sun. And soon everybody will be saying, Israel, pull back, pull back. That's why Israel needs to do as much as they can, as quickly as they can, if they want to get away with it. The final question that must be answered is this. Even if the Israeli counteroffensive is completely and rapidly successful, what then? Hamas rules Gaza because the majority of the population believes in its agenda. Thank you. I grew up in a Muslim country with educated friends in university. In the living rooms, in the bedrooms, in the homes, even your friendly Muslim neighbor who is friendly is kind of proud of this. They have the backing of the population. The civilians back them. In the last democratic election to the Palestinian Authority Parliament in January 2006, Hamas won the majority of seats. They're dedicated to the killing of all Jews. That is why Mahmoud Abbas, president of the Palestinian Authority, has consistently refused to conduct elections ever since. He's fully aware, and this is backed by the polls, that Hamas would gain an even higher proportion of seats. So if Hamas is thrown out of power in Gaza, who will replace it? Will the IDF have to stay there and conduct a non-stop counter-guerrilla campaign while attempting to provide administrative services to the population? This is the last thing Israel wants. The alternative is to withdraw and let the various factions fight each other for control. But given what is known about the opinions of the Palestinian people, either Hamas will recover its organization and position, or its only strong rival, the even more extreme Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So, here's what the only solution is. Of course, the only solution is the gospel. You guys know what the only solution is. Brother Norman says Russia has proved boots on the ground is most effective in war. Absolutely. Now, I'm not going to take like the Christian solution, and which is really preaching the gospel. But here's what it is: they've got to delegitimize the religion. There is no other way. You've got to delegitimize the Quran. That happens in the schools, at the level of the curriculum. The videos are on the internet. Just type in, see what is taught in Palestinian classes. Little children are daily taught that they die and be a martyr, go to paradise, that the Jews are the cause of all evil in the world, and that eliminating them entirely is the will of God. That's why it has nothing to do with economy. The children of Abraham are not atheists. Those are children of Abraham. They're spiritual people, not in a necessarily positive way. You've got to speak their language. You have a little bit of example of this, and this is, you don't have to be Christian to get this, but look, you have an example of this working out in this alliance or this détente between Israel and the Sunni nations. The Sunni nations, Saudi Arabia, extreme Sunnis, spent decades telling their people that the Jews were cursed of God and they must be eliminated because they're the cause of all evil in the world. Fomenting rage, murderous rage, bloodthirsty rage against all Jews everywhere in the children from the time they're born. They drink it with their mother's milk. How have those Sunni leaders now been able to reframe themselves as allies of Israel and not be accused of theological hypocrisy, which they are? Well, it's simple. What they've done is this. I'll give you an example. They went to the Quran. They've been saying for years that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Temple Mount, is the third holiest site in Islam. You open up CNN, you hear it. You hear that on MSNBC. And they'll tell them, we have to fight for the Temple Mount. We can't let the Jews go there. And that's why anytime a Jew would go there, you had a Palestinian intifada. So the Muslim clerics were teaching that the Temple Mount was the third holiest site in Islam. Where does that come from? Where does that come from? That comes from a verse in the Quran, in the Hadith. It's believed by all Muslims that Muhammad is in Mecca, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and he goes to sleep and he has a dream. He says he basically was raptured horizontally towards Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the furthest mosque. That's literally what that is. That's what it says. That's all it says. And from there, he was carried by a winged horse up to paradise. And then he came back down from paradise and returned to his tent. It says that he went to the Masjid Al-Aqsa. Historically, Masjid Al-Aqsa, the furthest mosque at that point, knew nothing about Jerusalem. The Muslims had not reached the Levant yet. They were still in the Arabian. Masjid Al-Aqsa was the city from which he started, Medina. And that's how all Muslims of their person understood it. With time, as the Muslims conquered the Levant, the geographical area was so wide, maybe if I give you the map, that would make it more accessible. Let me put the map up. Still good, guys? Can you hear me? I'm almost done here. I'll do this and then I gotta go. Yeah, I canceled the live sound a long time ago. Don't tell me the live sound is still on. I hope not. Where? Where's Mecca? One of the courses that I'm going to be doing in the Council Might Seminary as cults is about Islam. Too many times Bible believing seminaries concentrate on, when they teach cults, they teach about Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists, and that's well and good. That needs to be done. I've done it at Teaching Bible Institute. I've studied these things, and that's great. But most of the people that you're dealing with, most of the people who are in the Bible Institute and the Bible Believing Institute already know about the deity of Christ. They're not going to be fooled by that. Most of the people you're dealing with are not Mormons. Most of the people you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, if you think statistically, are going to be Muslims and Catholics and Jews. So I think a course on cults should teach those religions to the students more so than just Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. That would be a lot more helpful for the Christians. My family's arriving. I'm going to get to... Here we go. Where is that? Okay, so this is the kind of stuff I would teach you in the course. Yeah, can somebody just answer me this question? The live is gone, right? The sound is gone. I killed that a long time ago. I killed that a long time ago, so you shouldn't be hearing it now. Just let me know if you're still hearing it now. All right, so here we are. There's what Muhammad starts. He starts in Medina, over here. The Mecca is where over here, Mecca is where the heathen, and they're still heathen, they're walking around, they're circumambulating the black stone, the black building that houses a stone that fell from heaven. Does that ring a bell? So this is the area he wants to control. He's down here. So he's in Mecca. He has a dream that he went to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. The furthest mosque historically is here. At that point, the Arabs are still here. They know nothing about the Levant. The Levant is in the hand of Byzantine Christianity. So when he has that dream, that's the context, Mecca and Medina. That has nothing to do with Jerusalem. Jerusalem is nothing. Jerusalem is like whatever. It's like Antioch for them. It's nothing. Well, 100 years later, when they conquer the Middle East, they get to Jerusalem. Now you have a sprawling Muslim empire across north, very quickly. Very quickly. That's important. Over northern Africa and parts of Asia. So you've got, because of the distance, you have a new power center. You have a huge Muslim leader over in Syria. The leader in Syria doesn't want to be second rate to the leader in Mecca, because Mecca is the one with the most religious importance and Medina is the one with the second most religious importance. So the guy in Syria, the Khalifa in Syria, I'm simplifying here things, but the ruler in Syria wants to build up the theological weight of the area he controls to have more pull with the people. Now think about what Jeroboam did when he got the northern kingdom of Israel. Everybody's going back to Jerusalem to worship, right? He's up in northern Israel. And he thinks everybody's going to go to Jerusalem to worship. I'm going to lose control of them. They're going to go back to David. That's exactly what, I forget his name right now, the guy who was in charge in Syria was thinking. He says, everybody has to go to Mecca to worship in Mecca, and I'm going to lose them to the Meccan faction. So I'm going to have to prop up Syria religiously, the area here. By Syria, I mean the Levant. What did Jeroboam do? he built a calf, and he said, two calves, and he said, "These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought you out of the land of Egypt." That's exactly what this Muslim guy did. He said, well, you know that text in the Quran that says that Muhammad went to the furthest mosque? Because it's just described as the furthest mosque, which is a generic description without a name of a city, even though contextually everybody thought of it as Medina on the day. He said what that meant, that was talking about Jerusalem. So Muhammad came here, and it's from here that he ascended up to heaven. It was everybody's like, oh, whoa. And that's how Jerusalem became the third holiest site in Islam. Now, the Muslim theologians know that. And so once they started normalizing relations with Israel, their population was saying, how in the world do you normalize relations with Israel when Israel has taken back from us Jerusalem in the 1967 war, which is the third holiest site in Islam? And so now the Muslim theologians had to actually create a propaganda, which is true. They had to reverse propagandize, which is what was, they had to tell the truth. They were saying, actually, the Quran never says it's Jerusalem. The Quran just says it's Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the furthest mosque, and that was Medina, historically, contextually, not Jerusalem. So really, we're not giving up a Muslim holy site by letting the Jews have Jerusalem. That's what Israel needs to do with the Muslims. They need to know Islam well enough that they're going to target the curriculum in the schools. They need, if I were in charge of that department in Israel, man, I would go day and night over correcting the Muslim curriculum, putting out TV stations, channels, really propaganda, but showing the truth about the Muslim texts and arguing from the Muslim texts themselves against the religious beliefs of the Muslims. There's no other way you can do that. You can win that. That's the only language they understand. You gotta talk Quran. You gotta understand Islam, and you gotta educate the children about the truth in the Quran. They can do that. They can do that if they want. They do that politically already. Israel runs channels in Arabic. They run channels in Arabic, but they need to run religious programs on those channels and back. You know what they should do? They should back Christian evangelists. Israel really restricts us preaching the gospel in Israel. My uncle was a missionary in Jerusalem for 30 years. They restrict the preaching. If you are wise, give us protection. Give Christian missionaries protection. And give them the full liberty to preach to your people, the Jews, and also to Muslims. And tell the rabbis, let them preach. They're wrong anyway. They're just stupid Gentiles, right? But they're going to convert Muslims, and then Muslims won't hate us anymore because, hey, like it or not, the Christians are our friends, the evangelical Christians. You would think that being the smartest people on earth, the Jews would have enough sense. But they won't do that. You know why? Because there's satanic influence against the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Because God's going to make sure. I'll say this and I'll end with this. Look at the map. This will show you. I mean, that's going to bring you the Bible to life even more. The Bible is a living book. I want to show you something, and I'll close with this, and then I got to run. You're going to see a physical illustration in the map of something that God warned the Jews about. That's one of the coolest things I've seen in my Bible. How true that book is. The law of Moses, repeated in Joshua in the book of Judges. Watch this. What a book, man. God told them, warned them, ye shall. Now remember, they don't believe in the New Testament. So their theological background is that Numbers, the book of Numbers, is still binding. And so what does God tell them? Ye shall and that's what the religious Jews are arguing for. Ye shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell therein, for I have given you the land to possess it. And ye shall divide the land by lot for an inheritance among your families. And to the more ye shall give the more inheritance, and to the fewer ye shall give the less inheritance. Every man's inheritance shall be in the place where his lot falleth. According to the tribes of your fathers ye shall inherit. But if ye will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come to pass that those which ye let remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes, and thorns in your sides, and shall vex you in the land wherein ye dwell. How vexed are they this morning, friends? Moreover, it shall come to pass that I shall do unto you as I thought to do unto them. He says, thorns in your eyes, pricks in your sides. Look at the map. It'd be clearer in another one, the one we had before. Look at the map. There's the land of Israel in orange. Lord, what a book. Those annoying ads. Where is that map? I just had it. Here. No, don't click. Here. Look at that. See the gray area? In the sides of Israel. He says they're going to be thorns in your sides. Look at that. Look at that thorn in the side of Israel. Look at that prick in the eyes of Israel. Jerusalem is the eye of Israel, you know. Look at that. In the sides. Pricks in your eyes. Thorns in your sides. You know what Gaza means in Arabic? To prick.